Welcome back to Hidden Shadows. This week we continue our journey through the runes. Today's episode focuses on Thurisaz. Thurisaz is one of the most striking and complex runes of the Germanic runic tradition. It is commonly identified as the third rune of the Elder Futhark, the earliest widely recognized runic alphabet used among Germanic-speaking peoples of Northern Europe. At its most basic level, Thurisaz represents the th sound, as in the English word thorn. Yet, like many runes, its significance extends far beyond phonetics. It gathers together ideas of danger, defense, disruption, primal force, pain, boundaries, and transformation. The name Thurisaz is usually a term associated with a giant, monster, or destructive supernatural being. In Old Norse tradition, the related word thurs referred to a giant, while in the Anglo-Saxon rune tradition, the same rune was called thorn. These two strands, giant and thorn, are central to understanding the rune's symbolism. The giant suggests overwhelming, chaotic, and elemental power. The thorn suggests sharpness, pain, warning, and natural defense. Thurisaz is also significant because its sound survived in later writing systems. The rune is the ancestor of the letter thorn, which continued in Old English and remains part of the modern Icelandic alphabet. This linguistic survival shows that Thurisaz was not merely a mystical symbol, it was also a practical letter embedded in everyday communication, law, poetry, names, and inscriptions. In the Elder Futhark, Thurisaz appears third, following Fehu and Uruz and preceding Ansuz. This placement is meaningful in later symbolic interpretations. Fehu is often associated with wealth, cattle, and movable prosperity. Uruz with wild strength, vitality, and the aurochs. Thurisaz then introduces a sharper and more confrontational form of power. It is not simply energy or strength, but strength focused into resistance, impact, or defense. The visual form of Thurisaz reinforces this interpretation. Its upright stave with an angled projection resembles a thorn, spike, wedge, or weapon point. It appears simple, but the image is forceful, something standing firm while projecting outward. This makes the rune a natural symbol for boundaries, especially those that warn, protect, or wound when crossed. The medieval rune poems provide some of the most important literary evidence for how runes were understood after the earliest inscriptional period. In the Old English rune poem, the rune is called thorn and is described as exceedingly sharp and painful to anyone who touches or rests among thorns. This image emphasizes the rune's defensive and injurious nature. A thorn does not attack at a distance, but it punishes careless contact. The Old Norwegian and Old Icelandic rune poems call the rune thurs, usually translated as giant. These poems present the thurs as a cause of trouble, anguish, or affliction. The tone is ominous, suggesting that Thurisaz was not imagined as a gentle or purely benevolent sign. It pointed toward forces that could injure, overwhelm, or disturb the social and cosmic order. To understand Thurisaz in Nordic culture, it is necessary to understand the role of giants or Jotnar and Thursar in Norse mythology. These beings were not simply large monsters. They represented ancient, untamed, and often dangerous powers of the cosmos. Frost, fire, wilderness, storm, hunger, disease, and the vast forces that existed before and beyond human settlement. In many myths, giants oppose the gods, yet they are also deeply woven into divine ancestry, wisdom, and creation itself. This duality is essential. Thurisaz is not merely evil. It represents danger, but also the reality that dangerous power can be necessary. The Norse cosmos was not built on a simple division between good and evil. Instead, order and chaos existed in tension. The gods created, governed, and defended worlds, but they also relied on knowledge, materials, and even ancestry connected to giants. Thurisaz belongs to this boundary zone between threat and necessity. The rune is often linked symbolically with Thor, the thunder god, because Thor's mythic role is to confront giants and defend both the gods and humankind from destructive forces. In this sense, Thurisaz can represent both the giant and the force that answers the giant. It is the storm and the hammer, the threat and the response, the obstacle and the strength required to meet it. Thurisaz is commonly interpreted through several overlapping themes. The first is protection. Like a thorn hedge, it creates a barrier. It warns that not every boundary is soft and not every defense is passive. The rune can therefore symbolize the right to resist intrusion, to guard what is vulnerable, and to establish limits that cannot be ignored. The second theme is conflict. Thurisaz rarely suggests peace without tension. It points to confrontation, whether external or internal. This may be a clash with an adversary, an obstacle, a painful truth, or a destructive habit. The rune's lesson is that some conflicts cannot be solved by avoidance. They must be faced with discipline and awareness. The third theme is raw force. Thurisaz is energy before refinement, thunder before speech, pressure before breakthrough, instinct before wisdom. Such energy can defend, cleanse, and transform, but it can also injure if used recklessly. For that reason, modern interpretations often treat Thurisaz as a rune of caution as much as power. The fourth theme is awakening through discomfort. The thorn hurts because it forces attention. In symbolic terms, Thurisaz can represent the moment when pain reveals what has been ignored, a boundary crossed, a threat underestimated, a truth denied, or a change delayed too long. Runes in Nordic and broader Germanic culture were first and foremost a writing system. They appeared on objects, weapons, stones, ornaments, memorials, and personal items. While later tradition and modern imagination often emphasize magical use, runes also served ordinary communicative purposes, marking ownership, recording names, commemorating the dead, and shaping social memory. At the same time, writing itself could carry power in pre-modern societies. To carve a sign into wood, bone, metal, or stone was to make thought durable and visible. A rune like Thurisaz, with its associations of danger and defense, would have been especially suitable for later symbolic and protective readings. Whether used as a letter or as a meaningful mark, it belonged to a world in which language, memory, craft, and sacred imagination were closely connected. The cultural importance of Thurisaz also lies in its relationship to the Nordic understanding of limits. Human society depended on boundaries between farm and wilderness, kin and outsider, law and feud, settlement and chaos, Midgard and the outer realms. Thurisaz gives symbolic form to those borders. It reminds us that protection was not abstract. It was a daily concern in landscapes shaped by weather, scarcity, conflict, and myth. In modern society, Thurisaz appears in several different contexts. It is used in historical study as part of the Elder Futhark and as evidence of early Germanic literacy. It is also used in art, jewelry, tattoos, music, fantasy literature, games, and visual design, where its angular shape communicates a sense of antiquity, severity, mystery, and strength. In modern pagan, heathen, esoteric, and divinatory traditions, Thurisaz is often interpreted as a rune of protection, challenge, defense, disruption, and necessary confrontation. People may use it as a meditative symbol for setting boundaries, facing obstacles, or transforming destructive energy into disciplined action. These uses are modern interpretations, not direct evidence of a single ancient universal meaning, but they show how old symbols continue to evolve. Thurisaz also influences modern society through the broader revival of interest in Norse mythology. Contemporary culture repeatedly returns to Norse symbols because they offer compact images of power, fate, endurance, and conflict. The rune's connection to Thor and giants gives it immediate dramatic appeal. It suggests the moment when a person stands at the edge of danger and must decide whether to retreat, defend, or strike. However, modern use of runes also requires care. Nordic symbols have sometimes been misused by extremist or exclusionary movements, even though runes belong to a much broader and more complex cultural heritage. Responsible engagement with Thurisaz means understanding its historical depth, avoiding simplistic claims, and recognizing that symbols gain meaning from the communities and values that use them. One reason Thurisaz remains compelling is that its symbolism maps well onto human experience. Everyone encounters thorns: pain, resistance, opposition, fear, anger, and the need for self-protection. The rune can be read as a reminder that not all discomfort is meaningless. Sometimes discomfort reveals where growth is needed. Sometimes it signals danger. Sometimes it teaches respect for limits. Ethically, Thurisaz asks how force should be used. It does not glorify aggression for its own sake. Instead, it raises questions. When is defense justified? When does protection become harm? How can anger be transformed into clarity rather than destruction? What boundaries are necessary, and which are only fear disguised as strength? In this way, Thurisaz is both ancient and modern. It belongs to a mythic world of giants and gods, yet it also speaks to contemporary concerns: personal resilience, emotional regulation, social boundaries, cultural identity, and the responsible use of power. Thurisaz is a rune of the edge of the thorn, the edge of the storm, the edge between order and chaos, and the edge where defense becomes confrontation. In Nordic culture, it reflects a worldview in which danger was real, boundaries mattered, and cosmic order had to be actively maintained. Its association with giants and Thor gives it a powerful mythic charge, while its linguistic history grounds it in the everyday realities of writing and speech. In modern society, Thurisaz continues to influence art, spirituality, design, and personal symbolism because it expresses a timeless human problem: how to meet force with wisdom. It warns against recklessness, honors necessary protection, and reminds us that transformation often begins with a sharp encounter. To study Thurisaz is therefore to study not only a rune, but a philosophy of power, limits, and awakened attention. That's it for this week's Hidden Shadows. Join us again next week, where we will continue our journey through the runes with Antsus. As always, don't forget to like and share, and if you haven't already, follow or subscribe.